Hello, welcome to the Relationship Warehouse. This is Dr. Rick and I'm Matthew, and we're here to provide some biblical insight, information, and yes, some relationship tools to help your relationship go stronger and more healthy. Today we're going to be talking about how not to marry or date or even have a jerk in your life.
Or fall in love with one.
Or fall in love with one, even that. You know, Dr. Rick, I know some folks and there's some relationships and there are jerks in the relationships. And one in particular, there's a guy, I've been telling you, I don't know why the girl's with him. I don't know why the lady ever married him. I don't know even how they're even still together. Do you have any insight for people like this? Because I know out there are folks watching and they feel like they've married a jerk.
Well, I think we need to establish that it's not just us guys. There's also some jerkettes out there. So
really?
Let's kind of, normalize or just kind of level this playing field. There's jerks and jerkettes. So,
okay, good.
Us guys need a little bit of help here. But the reality is, there are people out there that you fall in love with someone, and as John Van Epp through the How to Avoid Marrying a Jerk program puts it, they fall in love and actually lose their mind.
Fall in love and lose their mind.
Yeah, because, we always like to say in our work that love is not a reason to marry someone. But you fall in love and you start losing your mind. You marry someone who is never marrying material in the first place, and you wonder why you have all this distress in your life when you're married. It's because you fell in love, lost your mind. You probably never should have married that person in the first place. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that is, because we can all think of relationships. We can think of someone that really is unhealthy. I mean, I'm thinking right now of a guy who tells his wife, I think it's like 18-year marriage or something like that, and his wife says to him, with pain, what needs do I meet? Mm-hmm. He says, all my needs are met for the church. And she says... You
mean all of his needs are met by the church?
That's what he says. Which basically, what that says to her right away.
And that she's not needed.
Well, she then asks with tears in her eyes, then what needs do I meet? And rather coldly, he basically says, sex and iced tea.
Wow.
Now, you want to know, when she looks back at the relationship, she can begin to see patterns of behaviors, those kind of things. So there's a lot of people that can, when things get really bad in a relationship, they start looking back and they saw patterns, but they go, gee, I wish I recognized this for what it was. And they go, why didn't I? Go, because you lost your mind. You lost your mind. So we're going to talk about that. I think the first thing we got to do is define what we mean by a jerk.
Yeah, so is there a definition that you're going to use today?
Yeah, the definition we like to use is really from the work of John Van Epp,
okay.
How to Avoid Marrying a Jerk. And the definition here is that it is a person with a pattern, and the key word here is pattern, of problematic behavior, whereby when you're in a relationship with that person, your ability as an individual to grow and mature and be healthy is actually hindered. So the longer you're in a relationship with this person, if you find yourself struggling to grow, mature, to connect, you're probably in a relationship with a jerk, or you're the jerk itself.
Okay. Now, when we were talking and meeting together beforehand, there were several characteristics of a jerk or pieces that we want to talk about. The first one is that a jerk is a person with limited insight. Now, what do we mean by limited insight?
All right. Healthy people have insight into why they do what they do. It's self-awareness. Daniel Goleman, in his book on emotional intelligence, says that one of the key people of healthy, emotionally intelligent people is self-awareness.
Okay.
They know what's going on inside of them. They're aware of what's going on inside of them. And because they have self-awareness, they're able to self-regulate, self-manage. So self-awareness is really knowing how you feel. Why am I feeling what I'm feeling for? They're able to step back and figure that piece out before they act.
Okay. So that was that first characteristic, a person with limited insight. Another characteristic that we talked about is this jerk, per se, or jerkette. They have poor emotional controls. Poor emotional controls.
Yes. Now, that has to do with the self-management. Because, see, if you lack self-awareness, you're going to be impulsive. Because you're just going with all this emotional energy. And because you lack self-awareness, then you give into that energy and you do things that are unhealthy. You yell, you scream, you might throw things. You're sharp with your tongue, or you're critical. That's all poor emotional impulse control behavior. All right?
But isn't it kind of like when there's a woman, and you know how a lot of times there are these ladies that they're attracted to the bad boys. They're attracted to the ones that have impulse control because it seems like it's going to be fun and that'll be exciting and so forth. Is that what you're talking about in this case?
That's about falling in love and losing your mind, because most of those people, when it's really said and done, years into the marriage, they hate that part. They wish they wouldn't be that way. See, up here, when you're dating, it all seems fun. go live with it for a long period of time, and it's no longer fun anymore.
I got you. I've heard it said that when, like opposites will attract, but then opposites attack later on.
Good point. Good point. I haven't heard it that way. I like that.
Okay.
I don't think I'll steal that one from you, too.
Oh, that'd be a good one, even though it's not mine. All right. So a jerk is a person with limited insight. A jerk is a person that has poor emotional controls. And another characteristic is that they have inadequate relationship skills.
Exactly. They don't know how to attach well. They don't know how to communicate well. They don't know how to listen well. And with core relationship skills that it takes for bonding and to have healthy relationships, they actually don't have those skills. They lack them.
Can they learn them?
All skills can be learned as long as you're teachable.
Willing to learn, okay.
Yeah, as long as you're teachable. So what I want to talk about now then is, this idea as, well, he's a jerk or she's a jerk, that kind of thing. Is there a difference between being a jerk and acting like a jerk?
Is there a difference between being a jerk and acting like a jerk?
In other words, have you ever acted like a jerk? And if you say no, we'll go talk to your wife.
Yes, I've acted like a jerk before.
Good man, because I haven't yet. But my wife does.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good.
And I lied. See, that just means I'm a jerk right there.
So since I've acted like a jerk, but I mean, certainly, I don't think that I meet these qualities of being a jerk.
And you don't, and that's the point. There's one thing to be a jerk. It's another thing to act like a jerk. Because just to be honest, all of us at times act like a jerk, don't we? So let's go back to our definition. Our definition is a person who has a pattern of problematic behavior. Look, we all have problematic behavior at times, but the person who has a pattern of problematic behavior, it's the pattern that matters. We all do things that are jerkish, but it's another thing to be a jerk. All right? And so you can always go, I'm acting like a jerk. A person who acts like a jerk will catch themselves and change.
Okay.
The person who is a jerk or a jerkette act that way and don't change.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the personality traits of a jerk or a jerkette. So what they are like consistently.
Okay. We have a few things here. Jerks think they have it all together, and instead admit that they have weaknesses. They're religious instead of spiritual. Well, they're good at going to church. They're really good at acting like they're in church, like they're godly. But they have a very shallow spiritual foundation of faith, okay? But they're good at being in church.
So they're better at the show than they are at being what is talked about there in the scripture.
Yeah, they know how to do church. They don't know how to be the church.
Okay,
in the biblical sense of the church there. They get defensive instead of open to feedback. So when you share something with a jerk and you start getting a lot of defensiveness, they're not teachable. I think the Bible puts it this way in the Old Testament, that a fool appears wise when he keeps his mouth shut, which means even wise people can look smart when they learn not to say something.
Absolutely.
That's about impulse control. But also it says that a wise man will accept rebuke, which means the wise person, the non-jerk, is someone who's teachable, who will get feedback, consider feedback in their life, and change what needs to be changed.
Right.
All right? Jerks are also people who are they're not trustworthy. A healthy person is trustworthy. Jerks don't like having their trustability questioned. But think about it this way. But a person who's really trustworthy, they're not offended when you question their trustability. Why? Because they're trusting. And if you have a problem with their trustability, they're not bothered by that.
Right.
Why? What do I need to do to prove it? The jerk gets defensive about it.
Oh, okay.
They demand a trust.
Okay.
You just have to trust me. And the reality is, no, I don't. No, I don't.
And I'm assuming, since if they get defensive about whether or not you trust them, they would expect absolute virtual control over you.
Many of them can. That's exactly right. I know of I'm thinking of a case right now. I'll just share. Back early in my marriage, Luella used to try and control what I would eat. So I would rebel against that, and I would start eating out. But the way I handled her and other issues was very immature, because I found myself not controlling in an overt way. I was controlling in a passive way.
Right.
I'd sulk, cop an attitude. I'd whine. I'd say, fine, whatever. I'd walk away. All of that is really jerkish behavior.
Right.
It's immature. And that's how I was early in my marriage. And I don't want to act that way. I want to come across in non-jerk ways, in ways that are healthy and mature.
Right.
All right. So I think what we can do now with the remainder of our time is like, well, how would you know if you're hanging out with a jerk, or how do you know if somebody's healthy? And I want to draw
the chart here, huh?
Yes, we want to draw our attention, and this is the work of Dr. John Van Epp from the How to Avoid Marrying a Jerk program, and he refers to this as the RAM, or the relationship attachment model. And this is really a brilliant way of thinking things through. And I got to really hand it to John, especially if he's listening today. You did a phenomenal job, and we're going to take your work and take it out there to the masses rather quickly here to kind of introduce it. Now,
RAM that has nothing to do with the computer, I'm assuming. It's
no.
really a
Relationship attachment model. You got it right there.
Okay.
Now, if you notice here, knowing, trusting, relying, committing, and touching. Each of these by themselves will actually attach you to another person.
Yes.
They're bonding traits. They're bonding elements right now, okay? So as I get to know somebody, I travel and speak a lot. And as I sit on the plane with people, I talk to them. I get to know them.
Sure.
By the time I get off the plane, I've built a relationship with that person. Why? We got to know each other on some level,
sure.
right? If you start trusting someone for whatever reason, you're going to bond to them. If you start relying on somebody, you're going to bond to them. If you commit yourself to someone, you bond. And on any level of touching, you're going to attach to someone. So each of these by themselves will actually attach you to another person.
Okay.
Now you notice they're on a hierarchy from minor touching, and we would say up here would be intercourse, okay? So this might be a pat on the back. Commitment is from low commitment to high commitment.
Right.
All right, low reliability to high reliability. Low trust or no trust to high trust. Not knowing much or little to knowing a lot.
Okay.
All right. Now, though these by themselves actually will attach you to another person, they actually work on a hierarchy.
In other words, they're going to help us determine whether or not we're involved with a jerk.
In a healthy relationship, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Here's how it works. As I increase my knowledge of you, the more I get to know you, that lets me know that I can increase my
trust in you.
Trust, because trust needs to be based on knowledge.
Okay, now hold on.
All right.
Let's say that I've researched somebody that was, I don't know, a major general or some congressman, and I've got all kinds of knowledge of that individual, but I have very little trust in that individual because of what I've discovered. So just because I have a lot of knowledge doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to have a lot of trust in somebody, right?
Exactly, because you just talked about researching. Trust has to do with experiencing someone.
Okay. Oh.
You have to experience that person.
So it's different than just head knowledge. It's actually like friendship.
It's experiential knowledge.
Okay.
So as I experience you and learn things about you, that lets me know whether you're trustworthy or not. I had a client not too long ago. She's been dating a guy for 3 months. Only known for 3 months. Been dating him. Already has given her, she has given him her checkbook and ATM card. Now, you don't know this person really well, but you're trusting that person way more than you should be. You see, and eventually it proved wrong. He went and took her money and split town.
Yeah.
You see, who's the jerk? Now, she was hanging out with the jerk, but I go, who's the jerk here? Because guess what? You're actually, you're giving too much trust to someone that you don't know.
But how many times do women out there, well, men too, but especially women out there, do this?
Quite a
get
bit.
burned.
But I think men do as well with
Right.
women. But it is. You have to know this person well, and we'll talk a minute here about what you need to know about a person before we start increasing trust.
Right.
So if the more I get to know you, that lets me know I can trust you. That lets me know, because trust is about risk.
Sure.
That lets me know that I can rely on you. Now I can start to place myself in your hands in a sense.
Right.
You're reliable based on the fact that I trust you, based on what I've learned. All right. That lets me know that I can what? Increase my commitment to you and express that through physical touch.
Right.
But here's what the culture says. The culture says, go ahead and sleep and marry somebody that you really know you don't rely or trust on. Or even if you don't know them much, it's okay to go to bed with them. So you have people who are involved in sexual activity and committing to relationships with people they don't know much, probably know they couldn't trust or rely on,
Right.
but they go ahead and sleep with them. And let me ask you, where's the problem here?
Well, first off, obviously, if we're talking to Christians, we're talking to folks that, I mean, this is wrong, and there's a reason why God has set things up this way.
There's an order here.
Yes.
Exactly right.
And God is a God of order.
Exactly. So ask me this question, Rick, what do you need to know about a person?
Rick, what do you need to know about a person?
That's a great question.
Amazing question.
Let's go back and let's talk about what you need to know about a person before you start trusting them, because that is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. You know, first thing you want to know is what kind of family did they come from? What's their family of origin like?
Right.
All right. In other words, You got to get to know how their family communicated. You want to know how they solve problems, and how did their family actually handle anger.
So what you're saying is, when you're talking about the family thing, you're not talking about, you're not saying that they can't marry someone who's come from a broken family, or even they couldn't have married an orphan or what have you, but you just want to know how they did what they did. It's not necessarily so much the fact that they're the perfect family.
No, because think about it. The way that person communicated in their family of origin,
Yes.
the way that they handle anger, the way that they solve problems is most likely the way that person is going to do it. And if in their home they yelled and they screamed, they threw things, called each other's names, you can't be surprised when they start doing that to you.
Right.
It's what they learned. It's what they do. Now you have to ask, do you want to date that and do you want to marry it? If they're not willing to change it, that's okay, but you're committing to someone you know that you don't want to be with, but you commit to them anyways, because there's things you know about them you don't like.
Yeah.
All right? So that's one of the things you want to know about a person. Secondly, you also want to know, how does your person, this one you're dating, how do they handle anger? They may handle it differently than their family. Maybe they came from a healthy home, but this one yells and screams and throws.
Well, but there are a lot of folks that are married that handle anger differently.
Right.
I guess what you're saying is make sure they handle the anger in a healthy way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because the way they handle anger, look, you know as a pastor that whatever you bring down an aisle with you is going out the door with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Whatever issues you brought in are going back out.
Sure.
All right.
And the whole family's on both sides of that aisle are going to go with you too when you leave, to some degree.
Yeah, exactly right, because you marry their history.
Probably another episode. But anyway, go ahead.
You marry a person's history for sure.
Absolutely.
And you got to know. And by the way, thinking of that, not only do you marry their family history, if you're a remarried couple, you also marry their divorce decree.
Yes.
You marry that divorce decree. So when you marry them, you also marry whatever that judge said about them for the rest of their days. Okay.
Yes.
So that's another piece of the puzzle. So you want to know about their family of origin. How does your partner communicate, solve problems, all right? Those kind of things. Next, what does their conscience look like?
Their conscience.
Their conscience. Now, this is interesting because that takes time to get to know someone.
I was about to say, how in the world do you see and know and read someone's conscience?
Through experience and time. Now, let's talk about conscience. Conscience is actually a regulator for people's behavior. It regulates what a person does. Now, some people have too rigid a conscience.
Yeah.
And the person with too rigid a conscience, that one is like always feeling guilty. It's always my fault. They always feel like, sin on a stick just melting off. Blah, it's
Sin
always
on a
like,
stick, huh?
And it's always their fault. There's no sense of, it isn't always about you. But then you have some people who have no conscience. They can hurt you and they don't care. I remember a premarital couple, and I usually share stories about Luell and I, but I do have a conscience. But I remember this guy, his girlfriend was hurting. We were in premarital. He was hurting her. She's feeling guilty about some things they were doing. And I looked at him and I said, did you know that what you're doing is hurting her? He said, no. I said, how do you feel about that? And he said, she can get over it.
Wow.
Just like that. Cold as can be.
Surely she knew at that point he was a jerk.
She married him anyways. They divorced 2 years afterwards.
Yep.
She saw it. But they were already sexually active, and she already felt that she had to stay committed because of this.
Yeah.
But she had seen that what I have learned, I can't trust or allow you, but she married him anyway, the marriage failed. So conscience is a regulator. That takes time to get to know a person, all right? So what's a healthy conscience? Healthy conscience, when I do something, I own up to it.
Makes sense.
I realize I hurt. It's about empathy, and it's about care and compassion, all right? So you want to get to know a person's conscience. And lastly, what are their past relationship patterns like? Are you another person in a string of relationships?
Past relationships. So like when we're watching these crazy quote unquote reality shows and The Bachelor or The Bachelorette or the whatever, and they're talking about the star of the show and how they've been engaged 3 times, and the third time that the reason it didn't work out is the girl left this bachelor guy for another man. That the women, or a woman that's looking to be involved with that individual, she should be paying attention to his previous relationships like that.
This is where you have to be careful also then. You're exactly right. Well, you've got to be very careful about some of these dating sites where you take a test and they say, we score all these things this tells you. What happens is those people start to believe the what? The score. Because though these folks say we've had so many marriages from our site, I can show you a whole bunch of divorces from that same site.
Oh, so they start believing the compatibility score thingy or
They,
whatever.
this says we're compatible.
Yeah.
I mean, look at all this. Folks, I have found so many people in my years of doing this work who have lied. Now, those sites go, well, it's not our fault that they lied. I go, no, it isn't. It is your fault that you project that you can find people with the right match. When the reality is, a piece of paper doesn't necessarily dictate that, because you don't talk about all the divorces that happened through your site.
Well,
so
that's not good for commercials.
Well, no, of course not. So that's why I warn people: you cannot take relationships and say, well, it's all about a scientific test. There is an issue of chemistry. There's an issue of experience and time. And let's be honest. I know you weren't that way, but I was. When we're dating, we always put our best foot forward. When we're dating, I let Luella see the person I wanted her to see.
I did too. Gina was convinced I was rich. I call it the Watergate period. It's a great cover-up, man.
And then reality sets in afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what happens is we always put our best foot forward when we're dating, and then reality sets in. And we all hide parts of ourselves. I mean, I'm not saying it's good or bad. We do.
We do.
It's just the way
You're
it
right.
is. And even in those test sites that say, hey, you just take this test, you can lie on those, because I've seen a lot of men who have done it.
But it sounds like to me like you're saying that you really can never know anybody very well, so therefore never trust them, never rely on them,
Nope.
and don't even commit to them.
No, actually, I think I like the work of Dr. Jim Talley. He wrote a book called Too Close, Too Soon. And in his book, he talks about the progression of relationships between men and women. And I think, if I recall it right, he said to really get to know a person well, it takes about 800 hours spread out over about, I think it's like 9 to 10 months.
Oh, wow.
And that's not 800 hours thrown into 3 weeks.
Yeah, right.
That's emotional intensity. That's this stuff over here.
Right.
You know, you have to have time apart and time together, spread out over time to really get to know a person well.
But doesn't our culture say through, and when I say our culture, like the media culture, doesn't it say like surely in 8 weeks on The Bachelor or 8 weeks on The Bachelorette that true love happens and then bang.
That's what the media is telling you. The media is telling you, oh, you can have all of this figured out in 30 minutes.
So what they're saying is it's a lie.
No, that's what we're saying.
I mean, no. I mean, what they're saying is a lie.
Yeah, what they are saying is a lie.
Yes.
It's not reality.
Okay.
I was reading here not too long ago that of all the bachelors that have gotten married, over half of them have been divorced.
Yeah, well, there's only one couple that's actually still together.
Exactly, because that's not reality.
Yes.
That's all this stuff over here.
Sure.
That's all this stuff, and it's a show.
Yes.
But relationships don't work that way.
Well, we were watching the news or the television or whatever one night, and my wife calls me in there and says, you got to see this, got to see this, got to see this. And it's one of the couples off of that. They're doing a thing where they look back over the years of the Bachelor or whatever. And there was this fella and the gal, and they had ended up together, and he was a professional fisherman or something or whatever. And bottom line, I mean, they end up, the police had been called several different times over the course of the relationship. They never could get married because, and he even said, I don't know that we ever really got to the point where we could trust each other enough to marry. But yet they lived together and traveled around for 2 or 3 years, and then they had and they would drink, and there was all kinds of problems involved with it. And he said, I didn't know who she was until the show was over.
Folks, it doesn't take a TV show. People are doing it every single day in real life. And you know what? It doesn't work. And we wonder why there's so many people out there dating jerks and jerks, marrying them and divorcing. It's because they're not taking the time to respect the process. Get to know them, then you can get trust, then you can rely, then you commit. And for those of us who are in the body of Christ, you save sexual intercourse for marriage, but you limit the amount of affection that you have to honor Christ and honor yourself and honor the relationship.
Okay, so let's say we've got the mother and the father of a teenager watching, and they're thinking this makes sense, but they're not looking for their teenagers at this point to get married, but they don't want them to get hurt either. So if we're looking at teenagers with this,
right?
Should they? I mean, what should a teenager be doing? And yes, they realize they shouldn't be having intercourse, but they're saying, but pastor, that's the ideal, and we live in the ordeal or whatever they're saying, which is a lie in of itself.
Right.
But what do we tell these parents about how do they need to be instructing their kids in relationships? Same thing.
Yes. Matter of fact, they can go purchase the John Van Nett material, How to Avoid Marrying a Jerk, and sit down and watch with their kids, you know. There's things that you can do out there to sit with your children and teach them. There's no way we'll get through all of that in the next couple of minutes here.
Sure.
But the reality is, what you've learned today a little bit is at least, hey, sit down with your kids. Tell them what they need to get to know about this other person. If you're starting to see some patterns in this person your child is dating, speak up. I learned this the hard way this past week. My son was dating this young lady, and I was worried about something, and it didn't work. And actually, we were driving home from church one night, and I made a comment to him, because he still has feelings for her, and I said, I didn't think it was going to work. He said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, what? He said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, that's a good question. I don't really know why. And he said, well, I'd like to know why. I said, would you have listened? He said, yes, sir, I would have. And I said, you know what? I failed you then. I think maybe didn't want to hurt your feelings, and out of that, and so he taught me, Dad, I want to know. I want to know what you think. And I promised him next time I won't hold back. I'll just tell you what I think.
Well, and for the parents of teenagers and even young adults out there, I would tell you, I completely agree with what Dr. Rick just said there. I think it's just, you just need to make sure that you're wise and compassionate as you're sharing your opinions, beliefs, observations, your impressions. Because I tell you, if you come across and you tell them what they can or cannot do, then I think at that point you're probably fueling a fire that you don't want to fuel.
Yeah, again, I think it was my son saying to me, I want your input, Dad. I don't think he wants me to tell him what to do. He's 17. But I realized he did want my input because he would have considered it. So he even taught me something here just recently.
Very valuable, very valuable. So in other words, even the experts.
Even the guys like me.
That's right.
Got a lot to learn.
All right, all right. Well, we have talked a lot about today and given you a lot of information on what a jerk or a jerkhead is like, how you define one, and quite honestly, whether you're in one of those relationships or not. But I want to remind you of something. With God, all things are possible.
Amen.
And so you must start and by turning to Him. And that's something that we have experienced in our own lives, and also something we would love to see you experience in your life. So until the next time we're at the Relationship Warehouse, we'll see you next time.